Welcome back, everyone. The second thing we're going to do this week is find equations of lines. And I know you probably did that a lot during intermediate algebra in your ninth grade year, but we're going to do it a little bit differently. Our focus is going to be on using point slope form to be able to find the equation of a line. And that's probably something you didn't do in intermediate algebra. So we're going to focus on it fairly heavily here and learn a new way to find equations of lines. So take a minute, get familiar with this page, and then we will look at some examples. Okay, the first thing that I want to have you take a look at is just finding the equation of the line when we're given the y-intercept and we're given the slope. And a lot of times people tend to um, make these way more difficult than they actually are. So the key thing to remember when you're finding the equation of a line, and we want to write the line in slope-intercept form, or y equals mx plus b, all we need is the m and the b. And once we identify the m and b, all we have to do is plug them into y equals mx plus b, and we're done. And people tend to overthink this type of problem because they think they need to do some sort of math in order to be able to figure out what the slope and the y-intercept is. But what's really happening here is it's telling you you have a y-intercept of 2 and a slope of 8. So it's giving you the y-intercept and the slope. So we know the slope is 8 and the y-intercept is 2. So all we have to do is write the equation as 8x plus 2. So way simpler than most people make this type of problem out to be. The second one is almost identical, except that y-intercept is presented in the form of a point instead of just a number. And this is one that people get confused with. And if you do, it's okay. You can use another method to find the equation of the line, but what you end up doing is just way more work than you need to do. So the thing you should recognize is that, hey, this is my y-intercept right here because the x value is 0. I know that the y-intercept happens when the x value is 0, so I know my y-intercept is -5. So if I'm wanting to find my slope and my y-intercept, I know I have a -5 for my y-intercept, and then it's telling me that I have a slope of 3. So I'm just going to go ahead and write those two things down, and then all I have to do is write the equation of the line. Y equals 3x, and since it's -5, we'll write -5. So much simpler than most people make these out to be. Okay, let's now take a look at an example where we're going to use that point slope form to be able to figure out the equation of the line. So point slope form, if you remember from the very first page, it's y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And the thing that I want to point out is we're only going to replace three things in this equation. We're going to replace the y1, the m, and the x1. And we're going to do it with the three things that were given in this problem. So it says find the equation of a line that passes through the point 8, -3. So that's where we're going to get our x1 and our y1. And then it's telling us that the slope is 1/4. So that's where we're going to get our m. Okay, so if I take those things and I plug them into this equation, the point slope form equation, I have y minus -3. So I could put it in there as y minus -3, but I like to kind of think through things a little bit and simplify if I can before I actually write it down. So if I'm subtracting a negative, I know it's going to become addition. So it's going to be y plus 3 equals my slope, which is 1/4. And then I'm only going to replace the x1. And in this case, it's positive. So I'm going to write -8. And this is something that a lot of people get confused with. The formula contains minus signs, and people sometimes want to write them as plus signs because if they see a positive number like 8, they'll write it as +8, but we want to remember that the formula contains a minus sign, so that's going to determine what symbol is going to be in there. Okay, so all we have to do now is distribute the 1/4 to the x and the 8. So we have y plus 3 equals 1/4 x. And then when I distribute to the 8, I know it's going to be negative, so I can write that minus sign in there. But then 8 times 1/4, it's essentially 1 times 8 divided by 4, or it's just 8 divided by 4, which is 2. And then what I want to do is I want to write it in slope-intercept form like it says up here. So I'm going to write the equation in slope-intercept form, so that's y equals mx plus b. And so I just basically want to get this y by itself, so I'm going to do that by subtracting 3 from both sides. So I end up with y equals 1/4 x, and they're both negative, so I just add them together and keep it negative. So y equals 1/4 x minus 5. All right, so that's a fairly basic example of how we can use point-slope form to be able to write an equation of a line in slope-intercept form. Let's take a look at another example. This time we are given a slope of -2 and that passes through the point -1, 5. And what we're going to do is we're going to write our answer in slope-intercept form and standard form. So we're going to have 2 answers for this one. So essentially what we're going to end up doing is use all 3 forms of a linear equation to solve this problem. So we're going to start by using point-slope form. So we have y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And we have our m is -2, and then our x1, y1 are the -1 and the 5. So I'm going to go ahead and plug those in. So we have y minus 5 equals -2 times x. Now, since it's -1, I'm going to write +1 because we're subtracting a negative. Okay, I'll distribute that -2, so I have y minus 5 equals -2x minus 2. And then to write it in slope-intercept form, I'm going to add 5 to both sides. So when I add 5 to both sides, I end up with y equals -2x plus 3. So there's one answer. There's our slope-intercept form. And now to write it in standard form, all we have to do is take our slope-intercept form and move the x value to the left-hand side. So in order to do that, we're just going to add 2x to both sides. So we end up with 2x plus 1y equals 3. Okay, so there we go. We have our slope-intercept form and our standard form of the exact same equation. All right, last example here. This one, we're not given the slope, but we're given 2 points. But we all know that we can find the slope by using the slope formula, so that's the first thing that we have to do. We have to take the slope formula, find the slope, and then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to find the equation of the line, write our answer in slope-intercept form and standard form. So to find the slope, I'm going to subtract the y values on top, so 4 minus 5, and the x values on the bottom, and it's important we go in the same order, so I'm going to start with the -3 minus -1. Well, minus -1 would be +1. Okay, so I can simplify this. I end up with -1 over -2. Or, since they're both negative, I just have 1/2. All right, so now I'm just going to take my point-slope form, my y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And I'm going to plug in my slope that I just found, and then I'm just going to pick one of the 2 points. I can pick either one of these. I can pick the -1, 5 or the -3, 4. What I don't want to do is pick one number from each one. So I wouldn't want to pick -1 and 4 or 5 and -3. I want to make sure that if I pick one point, I stick with that point. So I'm going to take the -1 and 5 and work with that one. So I'm going to say, all right, I have y minus 5 equals 1/2 times x, and it says x minus -1, so that's going to be x plus 1. Okay, so I'm going to distribute the 1/2, so I have y minus 5 equals 1/2 x plus 1/2. And then I'm going to add 5 to both sides, so I end up with y equals 1/2 x plus 5.5. And we can write it like that. I think that's okay. You could also write it as 5.5 if you wanted to. And you could also write it as a fraction 11/2 if you wanted to. All of those represent the same number, so I am good with any one of those. All right, to write this equation in standard form, we have to be careful with this one because it contains fractions, and standard form of a linear equation only contains integers, so we can't have any fractions in our answer. So what we have to do is we have to use the fact that 5.5 is actually 11/2. So I'm going to write it as y equals, oops, I got to have my pen out, y equals 1/2 x plus 11/2. And what I want to do is I want to get rid of the fractions because I don't want any fractions in my answer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply this entire equation by 2. And when I do that, I end up with 2y equals 2/2x. Well, that's just 1x, so I'm just going to write it as x plus, when I multiply the 2 by the 11/2, it just cancels the denominator, so I'm left with 11. Okay, so I've eliminated the fraction, and now I can write it in standard form simply by subtracting x from both sides, and I end up with negative x plus 2y equals 11. Okay, so it's really important that we make sure that our standard form of our linear equation does not contain fractions. So we're going to have to eliminate all fractions when we're dealing with standard form.